So maybe before we start to discuss the enablers and opportunities around LNG, just a short reminder why we actually discussing LNG at all, yeah, and a new fuel or a new energy source. This is a bit of a summary slide covering the developments that we see globally, which is population growth, energy demand growth, and at the same time a need for more efficient and for more cleaner and more sustainable energy. And part of the answer is gas. One of the things which you potentially maybe didn't know is that Shell 3 years ago became a company that is producing more gas than oil. So if anything, we are a gas major by now and not an oil major anymore. The reason for this is there's just more of it available. It's cleaner, and it's also it has some certain advantages around pricing for the customer base. Actually, Shell is the largest LNG producer in the world. This year, we've also acquired a large competitor, BG, which I think was number 3 in the world. So there is supply available. There's also quite a bit of experience available. Even though the business that I work in is only 4 years old, so that means the LNG for fuel, for transport business, we are in this LNG business as such for decades, supplying Korea and Japan, for example, for the industry demand. Coming back to the initial question that had been asked to deliver a speech on is what are certain options and drivers for LNG in the transport business. And bear in mind that even though we talk about maritime matters here, LNG as a transport fuel is also relevant for other sectors which companies are approaching, such as road, rail, industry, inland waterways, for example. So one driver obviously is access to the product, to the molecules, which is supply. I will quickly cover that in my presentation. The other one is obviously the regulatory environment. We've heard a bit about this yesterday. I'll cover a bit as well today. And the third part, costs. Just a few words around that because I had to take the presentation that was given. The idea or the approach that we have with regards to cost is we always price towards an alternative that is available to the customer base. In the marine space, that would be a heavy fuel oil or marine gas oil. And we'll try to make a business case that will make it cheaper for the customer to actually run on LNG. So there is an advantage, but we need to discuss the details, and I'm happy to do so with anyone who is interested afterwards, because it really depends on location, volume, and quite a number of other factors, access to capital, and so on. The challenge side is pretty much the other side of the coin of the left side. My personal view is that the only thing that is different in that overview, the engine technology, is available. We do have experiences, not only in PowerPoint, but in real life with customers around bunkering procedures, setting up technology, and that is something that is valuable, but that is also working. So that is not, in a way, a future idea. This is actually a reality already now. With regards to the regulatory environment, Shell, next to being a potential supplier, is also working with regulatory authorities worldwide. So we are a member of SGMF, CLNG Alliance, various LNG platforms in different countries. We have members via our STASCO colleagues in IMO committees. We regularly exchange with governments. So that is something where we have a clear view and also opinions on certain parts, which you will hear about during one of the next slides. I think I don't really need to cover this map when it comes to the Ecozones. You've also all heard about the IMO meeting 2 weeks ago, where the global sulfur cap was decided to be 0.5 globally. One thing, though, that I would like to highlight is 2 things that are not that prominently mentioned. One is that actually the Baltic and the North Sea will become NECA zones in 2021 for new build vessels. So this is something that you cannot solve with a scrubber, for example. So you would have to look at catalysts. And in that respect, LNG could potentially help. Another thing is, during the IMO discussions, there were discussions around the greenhouse gas strategy, which is supposed to be discussed again in spring 2018, to look at potential carbon pricing mechanisms. Yeah? So put a bit of a carbon tax on top of the fuel that you're using. And as you might be aware, LNG also gives some benefits around CO2. So that is another thing that will help avoiding certain costs that are due to come. So in a way, LNG is the only future fuel out of the available product range that you see now, with any low sulfur fuel oils or technical abatement technologies on top of heavy fuel oil, for example. The only thing that I want to mention here on that slide is that we as a company, not only because we own so much LNG or because we produce so much LNG, we also believe in it. So it's not only that we have vast amounts of it, but it's also, I would say a bit of a believer story. So there has been a board decision within our company to make LNG a reality in our own fleet as well, or in our chartered fleet as well. So, for example, we have converted one of our operated fleet vessels, the Rashida, to run on LNG. And there is a decision that whenever that is possible, we will also opt for that. So when we act as a charterer, Stasco acts as a charterer, this is also something that we look at, where we say, okay, those vessels, and not only the LNG carriers, should run on LNG because it's cleaner and it fulfills certain criteria that I previously mentioned. In other areas, such as inland waterways, we went a bit beyond. We have been chartering 15 inland waterway vessels and now are establishing bunker network along the Rhine. Those vessels will ship certain oil products, but they will run on LNG. So this is something where we also try to increase the own use component of LNG within our area of influence, if you want to put it this way. This slide is talking a bit about the commercial benefits of LNG. So yesterday we had a presentation by Wärtsilä, and actually those comments, the reduced cleaning requirements, the man hours, those are based on an actual case that we worked with Wärtsilä. We had a project or examination where we compared gas engines and their diesel counterparts with scrubber and SCR to have a fair comparison. And we actually found, over a period of 20 years, savings of $2.7 million just through the use of LNG when it comes to maintenance costs. And that is something where, let's say, in a personal discussion, we can share a few more data, but please, I need to apologize that we cannot do that in an open PowerPoint here. The following slide is supposed to give you a short snapshot of the current supply network that we are working on. The first message that you should take away is that we're always trying to stay a bit ahead of the demand curve. Yeah? So obviously the investments are quite huge, and there needs to be a customer or an anchor customer, but we are willing and ready to invest if there is one. And we'll try to do that in close exchange with the customers that we talk to, or the potential customers that we talk to. The second message that you should take away is that we have a global network. So it's not only the North European SECA zone that we are covering, but it's actually globally. Proof points are, for example, Singapore. We've just been awarded to build an import terminal there and to supply the local demand in Singapore. We've signed MOUs with Qatargas, Maersk and UASC to set up supply in the Arab Peninsula. We've signed an MOU and actually a sales purchase agreement with the government of Gibraltar. So we will build a terminal there, which is supposed to mainly cater for the industry demand in Gibraltar, but we will also have access for marine customers. So it's not just standalone for one sector, but it's actually several sectors that we try to serve. We have several bunker vessel projects in the pipeline that are supposed to cater the various regions, the Mediterranean, for example. You might have heard about the Carnival deal for the new cruise ships that we've signed, which will sail in the Mediterranean, and obviously those need to be supplied. We have existing infrastructure in Norway through our subsidiary Gasnor, and in Zeebrugge and Gate. So we hold capacities in Rotterdam and Gate. That means we don't own the asset, but we hold capacities there. And we also look at areas along the Gulf and East Coast in the US. Savannah and New Orleans are the two red dots that you see there. And obviously also the Panama Canal and certain other canals or areas that we try to connect also the global networks and not only the regional ones that we have here in Europe. One example that I've just mentioned is Gate. I already said we hold capacities there, which are quite significant. Gate is currently, in a way, being rebuilt to cater I would say the demand for mobility or for transportation. I mean, the initial idea of Gate was take a bit of LNG, regasify, and pump it into the Dutch gas grid. And at some point of time, people found out there's another use for it as well. And that's why they're now building jetties, truck racks. So there is quite a bit of change ongoing, and we sit on the back of that to serve our customers from Gate, from Rotterdam. So there is I don't know actually how old it is, August. So that is a picture of Gate currently, status of the building or the construction. The next example for supply options is the bunker vessel that we are currently building. The idea is obviously there's also a bit of a learning curve is to have flexible supply, floating supply. Yeah? So the product is supposed to come to the customer, not the customer to the product. So that vessel has Type C tanks on board. It's able to perform 3 bunker operations per day. It has about a flow rate up to 1,100 cubic meter an hour, so we can serve large vessels with that. It's not ice classed, but the home of that vessel, that bunker vessel, is supposed to be Rotterdam, and that should be sufficient to serve the customers that we see there. The vessel is owned and operated by Shell. That does not necessarily need to be the business model for all future bunker vessels that we are currently planning for. But for the first one, we really want to have control over everything that is being done and also take the learnings from that. That is also what we did let's say, in other areas, such as, for example, setting up retail sites, LNG retail sites. Shell has currently 3,000 mariners as staff, so we're not only the largest charterer, but also quite a significant maritime player, I would say. The vessel is built at STX in Korea, and you know the news about STX, but in a way the bunker vessel and some other projects are excluded from the problems that are happening at the yard. So the courts also approved a rehabilitation plan, so the LNG projects are out of this, and also we have some people on the ground to ensure that the vessel will actually be in Europe in Q1 next year, and then operational in Q2 next year. So it's all on plan. Keel laying took place. Now it's commissioning. You see a picture there of the vessel. That is all on plan. We have no indication of any issues whatsoever. Until recently, the bunker vessel was the largest bunker vessel on order with 6,500 cubic meters, and there are a few specific or unique features on board of that vessel that I would like to highlight. One is a transfer arm, so that is fully automated. once you'll have the PowerPoint or the PDF available afterwards, you can click that YouTube link and you'll get a bit of a better feeling of how that actually is working. The idea here was, so we also have a hose on board of the vessel, but the idea here was to minimize the human factor, because that has shown to be one of the main causes for issues, for risks, for spills, and so on. So that is quite an interesting feature that we are planning to use, and yeah, that might be also of interest for you. The second interesting part is a subcooling unit designed by Air Liquide. So that works in a bit similar way like a reliquefaction plant. We've chosen the one that is highlighted here. I mean, there are more available on the market also for vessels that you might be interested in. The main advantage is that we are able to keep the temperature and the quality of the LNG as per loading in the terminal, and also to serve all kind of receiving tanks or all kind of receiving vessels. And that is something that we opted for, also to avoid boil-off gas issues. Coming to the end of the presentation, this is just a few examples of how and where we are using LNG in the market. I've highlighted before that we've set up quite a big supply network already and have plans for this. We have customers globally already. We try to look at synergies with within other sectors as well. And there is a bit of experience given let's say, the deliveries of LNG over the last decades within our company. So to sum up, why is LNG relevant for you? As I mentioned earlier, given all the regulatory changes, it's the only future-proof fuel that is available. Yeah, so despite what is coming, you still will have to either pay a bit more due to certain carbon taxes that might come, or have to install certain equipment, scrubbers, catalysts, for example. And honestly, I mean, I'm just asking myself, why using a dirty fuel and make it cleaner afterwards and not use a clean fuel in the beginning? So that is something that I think should be relevant. All the other factors around the costs we can work on, and we see business cases working. Actually, we are in a situation where, at least in the cruise industry sector, you cannot afford to go traditional anymore. Yeah? So, I mean, you've seen all the announcements. I don't know of many new built cruise vessels that are actually built conventionally. And I think we'll see similar developments in the other areas. Despite your comment around world domination, we still see quite a bright future for LNG, given everything that is happening currently in the market. With that, I would stop and would be happy to answer any questions that you might have or comments.